Right in the heart of Jerusalem, there's this path. It's only about 600 meters long, but millions upon millions of people have walked it. It's truly one of the most famous and revered journeys in the entire world. It's called the Via Dolorosa. And in this explainer, we're going to peel back all those layers of tradition and archaeology to uncover what this path is really all about. So, Via Dolorosa, it's Latin for the way of sorrows or the way of grief. And for centuries, pilgrims have come to trace these very steps. Why? Because they believe it's the exact route Jesus took, carrying his cross from his trial with Pontius Pilate all the way to his crucifixion at Golgotha. And that right there is the big question. It's really the whole reason we're doing this today. I mean, when millions of people follow a path, you just assume it's based on solid historical fact. But what if it's not? What if the real journey was actually somewhere else entirely? To figure this out, we've got to become something like historical detectives. See, the traditional route that people walk today isn't just a random guess. It's built on 3 very specific assumptions. And like any good investigation, the first thing you have to do is test your assumptions against the evidence. Okay, so here are our clues. First, the starting point. Was the trial really at the Antonia fortress? Second, the destination. Is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in the exact right spot? And third, the ground itself. Are we even walking at the right elevation? I mean, has the terrain changed in 2,000 years? Now that last one, basic archaeology gives us a pretty quick answer. Jerusalem has been destroyed and rebuilt so many times that the first century ground level is buried several feet below the modern streets. So let's focus our investigation on the 2 biggest clues, the start and the end. Let's start right at the beginning, the trial. The location of Jesus' trial before Pilate, this is the single most important clue. If we're going to figure out the correct route, everything, and I mean everything, hinges on getting this right. The Gospels tell us the trial happened at a place called the praetorium. Now, that word originally meant a commander's tent in a Roman camp, but by the 1st century, it had evolved. It was the official term for a Roman governor's headquarters. And here's the crucial part. This wasn't necessarily some military fort. More often than not, it was a palace, a real seat of power where the governor lived. And this is where we see the 2 competing theories side by side. Tradition, for centuries, has pointed to the Antonia Fortress, a military barracks up in the northeast corner of the Temple Mount. But modern scholarship and a whole lot of archaeological evidence, it all points somewhere else entirely, to Herod's palace. This was a massive, lavish compound on the complete opposite western side of the city. And we have historians from the time, guys like Josephus and Philo, who both confirm that when Roman governors like Pilate came to Jerusalem, this is where they stayed. The fortress was just way too small. And hey, you don't have to take my word for it. Listen to archaeologist Shimon Gibson, who has dug all over Jerusalem. He's about as clear as you can get. He says there can be no doubt that Pilate's headquarters, the praetorium, was Herod's palace. So this isn't some fringe theory, it's pretty much the scholarly consensus today. And to get even more specific, archaeologists have actually found the foundations of a massive gate complex at Herod's palace. It had this huge paved stone platform. We're talking 30 by 11 meters. Definitely plenty of space for a public trial. In fact, a lot of scholars believe this platform is the actual Golgotha, or stone pavement, that the Gospel of John mentions, where Pilate sat on his judgment seat. So what does all this mean? Well, it's a total game changer. If the trial happened at Herod's palace on the western side of the city, then the traditional Via Dolorosa, which starts way over at the Antonia Fortress in the northeast, it starts in completely the wrong place and probably heads in completely the wrong direction. Okay, so we've completely moved the starting line. But, a journey needs a destination. So now we gotta ask, what about the end of the line? The site of the crucifixion itself, Golgotha? Now, the good news for tradition is that most scholars actually agree the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is in the right general area. Back in the 1st century, this whole spot was an old abandoned rock quarry just outside the city walls. But, and this is a big but, there's a problem with this specific spot inside the church that's pointed to, a spot known as the Rock of Calvary. The logistical problems here are huge. The top of this rock is tiny, way too small to fit 3 crosses. It's also really steep and hard to get to. But the biggest problem? Its location. It's almost 80 meters away from any major 1st century road. And we know from Roman sources that crucifixions were very, very public. They were roadside horror shows designed to scare people. As the writer Quintilian put it, they chose the busiest road so the greatest number of people could see it and be seized by fear. So the bottom line is this. While the church is probably in the right neighborhood, the crucifixion itself almost certainly happened on a lower, flatter, more accessible part of that same quarry, right up against a major road where all the passersby mentioned in the Gospels could have easily seen everything that was going on. Okay, so we have a new starting point on the west side of the city, and we've tweaked the endpoint a little bit. With all this new information, can we actually retrace a more historically accurate path for the Way of Sorrows? Let's see. All right, first, let's just take one last look at the traditional route. It starts up here at the Antonia Fortress, and then it winds its way west through the city. And as we now know, this is almost definitely based on a mistaken starting point.
So for a long time, most scholars proposed this other route called the Upper City Model. And it makes a lot of sense, right? It starts at the correct location, Herod's palace, it cuts through the wealthy upper city, and then it goes out through a city gate towards Golgotha. Seems like a pretty simple direct path.
But wait a minute. When you really start to dig into the logistics of first-century Jerusalem, well, even this more logical route starts to fall apart. It actually creates a whole new set of problems. I mean, just think about it. First, the crowd. You've got this group of at least 25 to 35 people, soldiers, prisoners, priests, followers, all trying to navigate what were probably just narrow, winding residential alleys, not exactly a parade route. Then there's the private property issue. This path would go right through Herod's personal palace complex. I mean, come on, there's no way a Roman governor would let a potentially volatile crowd march through his house. And finally, and this is a big one, ritual purity. We know the chief priests wouldn't even enter the praetorium earlier because they didn't want to become unclean for Passover, so they're certainly not going to march right through it now. It just doesn't add up. And this brings us to what the most recent scholarship suggests, which is actually a much, much simpler solution. Instead of trying to force this whole procession back into the city's crowded streets, the most probable route would have been the most direct one, starting from the Gate of Judgment and just heading north outside the city walls, straight to the place of execution. It just avoids all the logistical chaos. So after all this historical and archaeological detective work, we've pieced together a very different path from the one that millions of people walk today. And that brings us to a final and maybe the most important question about what this journey really means. We've seen some pretty compelling evidence that the starting point is wrong, the direction is wrong, and even the ground you're walking on is at the wrong level. And yet, every single day, hundreds, sometimes thousands, of people walk that traditional Via Dolorosa with incredible reverence. So why? And the answer, really, is that its value isn't about historical precision. As tour leader Barry Britnell puts it, walking the path is a powerful act of remembrance. It's a spiritual exercise. It's a tradition that connects people across centuries to a story and a sacrifice. Its truth, for them, doesn't lie in its geography, but in its meaning. And that really leaves us with a fascinating thought to chew on. For centuries, two paths have existed in Jerusalem, the one of historical probability, the one uncovered by archaeology, and the one of faith, worn smooth by the feet of pilgrims. And what this exploration shows us is that sometimes the most important journeys we can take are the ones that force us to stop and ask which path we're truly following.